It all started with a note. One simple line among hundreds of routine requests, shift changes, time-off forms, paycheck corrections. But this one stood out. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was painfully quiet. Would it be possible to take home any leftover food after my shift? That was it. No explanation. No request for help. Just a quiet, written plea. And the man reading it, Connor Hastings, CEO of a massive food chain, didn't quite know why it froze him in place. Connor had seen it all. Hundreds of requests every week. Payroll questions, health insurance complaints, employee disputes. They came in, got filtered, answered, archived. But this one, he couldn't scroll past it. The request came from Valeria Mendoza, 24 years old. Line cook. No red flags on her file. No complaints from management. Never late. Always one of the last to clock out. But this note, it wasn't normal. Most employees, if they wanted to take something home, just asked their shift lead. Some snuck leftovers out in to-go boxes. No one put it in writing. Why had she? Why go through the system? Connor wasn't emotional by nature. He didn't meddle in personal issues. That wasn't his job. But something about the formality of it, the humility in her wording, made it feel less like a question and more like a cry. He typed her name into the system. No emergency contacts. No spouse. No roommates listed. Just her. Connor leaned back in his chair. Maybe she was just frugal, trying to stretch her budget. A lot of employees did that, especially those supporting families overseas. But this didn't feel like budgeting. It felt like survival. He checked the time, 10:47 p.m. Her shift ended at 11 o'clock. The restaurant was just a few blocks from headquarters. Without really planning it, Connor grabbed his coat, shut down his laptop, and headed out into the night. He didn't know what he expected to see. He wasn't even sure what he was looking for. But something in his gut told him he had to go. The air was crisp and cold. Most of the employees had gone home. From behind the kitchen's back entrance, he spotted her. Valeria, wiping the last of the counters. Hair tied back loosely, a few strands clinging to her damp forehead. She moved fast. Efficient. Like someone who knew every inch of that kitchen better than her own home. A supervisor passed her a small brown paper bag. She nodded softly. No smile. Just a quiet acknowledgement. That must have been the food. Valeria untied her apron, folded it methodically, and placed it on a hook. Then, she grabbed her old, worn-out backpack. Connor stayed back, watching as she stepped out into the empty night and began walking toward the bus stop at the far end of the street. He hesitated. Something about watching her, a worker finishing an exhausting double shift and quietly waiting alone under a flickering streetlight, hit him harder than he expected. He wasn't used to this. Private drivers. First-class flights. He'd never once waited for a bus at 11 p.m. after being on his feet all day. And yet, that's what Valeria did. Every night. Connor got into his black sedan. He didn't start the engine right away. He just watched. Valeria shifted from foot to foot, arms crossed, glancing down the street. The bus was late. Finally, the distant glow of headlights approached. She boarded without looking back. Connor followed. He kept several cars behind, careful not to be noticed. The ride was longer than he imagined. Every few minutes, he expected her to get off. But she didn't. Stop after stop passed. Lights became dimmer. Shops gave way to shuttered storefronts. Buildings became garages. Garages became fences. Eventually, homes disappeared altogether. Street lights flickered. Sidewalks cracked. The city vanished behind him. Connor checked the time, 12:22 a.m. Finally, she pulled the cord. The bus hissed to a stop. Valeria stepped off. He parked at the far end of the block. She didn't look around. She didn't slow down. She walked with purpose, fast, focused, as if she knew how unsafe the area was, and didn't have the luxury of fear. Then, she turned a corner, disappearing behind a row of parked cars. Connor crept forward. He didn't know why. Didn't know what he was even hoping to find. But what he saw next. It wasn't an apartment. Not a duplex. Not even a shared house. It was a trailer. A tiny, rusted, beaten-up trailer parked behind a crumbling wall. Valeria climbed the rickety steps, balancing the bag of food in one hand. She unlocked the door carefully, glancing over her shoulder once before entering. A faint light flickered on from within. Connor froze. This wasn't what he expected. But it got worse. Because what he saw next wasn't just poverty. It was something else. Something far deeper. Connor parked a little farther down the street, just enough to keep from being seen, yet close enough to observe. The trailer was small, barely standing. The kind of place you lived in not by choice, but because every other door had been slammed shut. He leaned forward in his seat, eyes locked on the faint glow coming from inside. Through the thin curtains, shadows moved. Then, 3 small figures appeared. Children. They rushed toward Valeria as soon as she stepped inside. Tiny arms wrapped around her waist. Laughter. Excitement. Joy that didn't match the bleak surroundings. She knelt down, embracing them all at once. Her exhaustion, all those hours on her feet, the sweat, the grease, the late bus, it seemed to vanish, if only for a moment. Then came an older woman, thin, hunched, moving slowly, cautiously. Gray streaks ran through her tangled hair. Her hands trembled slightly. Valeria gently helped her into a chair, whispering something close to her ear before placing the brown paper bag on the tiny counter. She began unpacking it carefully, almost ritualistically. 1 sandwich, a portion of rice, some leftover vegetables. Not much, but enough to divide. She made 4 plates, not 5. The children ate quickly. The older woman ate slowly, her hands shaking as she lifted her fork. And Valeria. She sat at the table with them. She smiled. She nodded. She joined the conversation. But she didn't eat. Not a single bite. She picked at the food, cut pieces smaller, shifted them around the plate, but never brought anything to her mouth. Connor narrowed his eyes, jaw tightening. She was pretending to eat, so that the kids wouldn't worry, so that the grandmother wouldn't offer her portion, so that no one would feel guilty while she went hungry. His chest ached. That night, he'd eaten at a high-end restaurant with 2 clients. A perfectly grilled steak, 3 sides, dessert he barely touched. The bill. More than Valeria probably made in 2 days. He hadn't finished it. Didn't even take it home. But here she was, sitting in a crumbling trailer, serving everyone else. Smiling. Pretending. Giving up her only meal of the day, without hesitation. Connor gripped the steering wheel. He'd come here out of curiosity. Maybe even suspicion. He thought he'd confirm that she just needed a little extra help. But this was sacrifice. This was someone holding an entire family together with scraps and silence. He swallowed hard, watching as the kids chatted between bites. Valeria listened intently, responding with warmth. Her eyes, though tired, were soft. But every so often, when no one was looking, she'd rub her temples. Her shoulders would drop. The smile would fade for half a second. Just long enough to reveal the weight she carried. Then, the oldest boy, maybe 10, maybe 11, looked at her and asked, "Did you eat at work today?" Connor held his breath. Valeria paused, just a fraction of a second. A tiny flicker in her eyes. Barely visible. Then she smiled. "Yeah," she said softly. "I had something earlier." The boy watched her for a moment, then looked down and kept eating. But even from where he sat, Connor could see the doubt in his eyes. She had lied. He knew it. But he let it go. Because maybe he, too, was used to it. Connor leaned back in his seat, exhaling sharply. This wasn't the first time. Not a one-time skip. This was a pattern. Valeria had likely been skipping dinner for weeks. Maybe months. And yet she showed up to work. On time. Every day. Pulling doubles. Smiling. Serving others. And going home. To give everything she had left to those she loved. Even if it meant having nothing for herself. Even if it meant going to bed hungry. Again. He looked around the trailer again. The walls were stained. The carpet, if you could call it that, was more patch than fabric. No decorations. No photos. Just function. Survival. The kids started yawning, one by one. Valeria gathered the plates, kissed them on the forehead, and helped them toward a small section in the back, separated by nothing but a thin curtain. The grandmother made her way slowly to an old recliner. She adjusted herself into it, clearly preparing to sleep there. Connor squinted. Wait. That was her bed? He scanned the space again. 4 people. No bedroom. No extra space. Then he saw it. A thin, folded mattress on the floor near the kitchen. Just a blanket. No pillow. No cushion. That was Valeria's bed. Not a couch. Not even a cot. Just the floor. Connor swallowed hard. After all that work. After hours on the line. After feeding dozens of strangers. This was where she laid her head. He looked down at his leather seats. The luxury console in his car. The custom-stitched interior. He looked back at the trailer. And something broke inside him. This wasn't just about Valeria. This was about every invisible worker he'd never truly seen. Connor sat in his car, motionless. His hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. The quiet hum of the street, the distant buzzing street lamp, the occasional passing car, all faded into background noise. Inside that trailer, Valeria smiled. She rubbed the kids' heads, whispered something to the grandmother, and began to fold her thin blanket over the mattress. To anyone else, it might have looked like strength. But Connor could see it now. The weight in her shoulders. The fatigue in her posture. The quiet ache she hid behind soft smiles. And suddenly, he wasn't angry at her situation. He was angry at himself. At what he had become. At the system he built. At the lie he had told himself for years. That his company took care of its people. But clearly, it didn't. He thought about the leather chairs in his office, imported from Italy. The espresso machine that cost more than her monthly rent, if she even paid rent. He thought about the gourmet meals thrown out every night, the executive retreats, the performance bonuses given to people who hadn't missed a meal in years. And then, he thought about Valeria, sleeping on a floor, pretending to eat, leading a life in the shadows, while helping keep his empire standing. Connor's stomach turned. How many others like her existed in his company? How many had written polite requests? How many skipped meals to feed someone else? How many smiled through exhaustion because they had no other choice? He had read the reports, approved the payroll, signed off on policies, but he had never looked. And now that he couldn't look away. He pulled out his phone and opened his contacts, scrolled until he found the number. It was late, nearly 1 a.m., but he didn't hesitate. The phone rang twice before a groggy voice answered. "Sir, it's past midnight. Is everything okay?" "No," Connor said firmly. "Nothing is okay." A pause. "What do you mean?" Connor looked back at the trailer one last time. "I mean we're fixing this. All of it. Starting tomorrow." He didn't wait for a response. He hung up. Because this wasn't a conversation. It was a decision. And Connor was finally ready to make it. The next morning, he walked into the office with a different look in his eyes. No morning meeting. No casual greetings. No small talk. By noon, his executive team was in a room. No presentations. Just truth. He told them what he saw. Not with spreadsheets, but with words that carried weight. He talked about Valeria. About children eating quickly. About a woman sleeping on a floor. About pretending not to be hungry. Some executives looked down. Others shifted uncomfortably. One tried to speak. "Connor, I understand your concern, but we can't solve every employee's personal issue." "We already are," Connor interrupted. "Every single day. We just don't notice it. And that ends now." That day, changes began. Leftover food? Now packaged and distributed to employees every single night. No more requests. No more shame. Salaries were re-evaluated. Wages increased. Minimum wasn't going to mean barely enough anymore. A new program launched, Emergency Financial Assistance. No red tape. No begging. Just help, fast and real. Valeria came to work that afternoon, unaware. She walked through the back door, tied her apron like always, started her prep station. Until her manager gently tapped her shoulder and handed her a sealed envelope. Inside, a raise. A significant one. Enough to leave the trailer. Enough to move her family into a real home. Enough to eat, without guilt. Enough to breathe. She didn't say anything at first. She just stared at it, hands trembling. Then, she smiled. Not the tired smile. Not the pretend one. But a real one. Connor saw her from the other side of the kitchen and nodded once. She didn't know everything he had seen. But she didn't need to. Because for the first time in a long time, she didn't have to pretend. Weeks passed. Then months. The changes Connor made didn't fix everything. They didn't erase all struggle. They didn't end inequality. But something was different now. The air in the break rooms felt lighter. People lingered longer after their shifts. They talked. They laughed. They felt seen. And Valeria, she began to eat. Without hiding. Without lying. Without giving her plate away. She even started to help coordinate the food packages for others. Not out of obligation, but because she knew how it felt. To be invisible. To go to sleep hungry. To carry a family on your back, and still smile. One morning, at a conference, someone asked Connor, "What made you change everything?" He paused, thought carefully, and said, "I followed one of my employees home. She asked to take leftovers, and I learned what leadership really means. It's not about managing people. It's about seeing them. Leadership isn't about making big decisions. It's about noticing the small things no one else sees. A mattress on the floor. A plate pushed away. A smile that hides hunger. When you have the power to change something, you don't wait. You do it. Because sometimes the smallest gesture can rebuild a life." Do you know someone silently sacrificing everything for the people they love? Share their story. Maybe it's time someone finally saw them. Leave us your opinion in the comments. It is very valuable for us to know your point of view. Thanks for listening to this story. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and turn on the bell so you don't miss our next stories. See you tomorrow.
She asked if she could take home some leftover food. Her boss thought it was nothing, so he followed her home. What he saw that night shattered him.